Hey guys, tonight we wander somewhere very old. You can almost feel the dust cling to your skin as the sky blushes purple over Thebes. Not modern Thebes. No, this is 300 years ago, give or take. The land is quiet in that peculiar way. Deserts are quiet, like it's waiting for something to wake up. But oddly enough, it isn't the living that we're waiting for. You're walking barefoot through the edge of a necropolis, down limestone paths worn smooth by centuries of silent priests and shuffling workers. There's the distant flick of a linen robe ahead. You follow, drawn by the smell of fresh bread and something smoky. No, not smoky, incensed. Frankincense crushed and slow burning in clay bowls shaped like lotus blossoms. You feel the warmth of the sun rising behind your shoulders, but the world you're entering doesn't belong to the sun. It belongs to shadows. You're here to watch something very ordinary and completely surreal breakfast, but not yours and not even for the living. This breakfast is for the dead. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're drifting in from. Now dim, the lights maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin at the edge of the Valley of the Kings, the air still cool and dry from the desert night. You pass palm trees bowing gently in the breeze and date sellers with baskets still covered in cloth. No one talks much before sunrise, and you wouldn't either not when the city of the dead is stirring. The temple of millions of years looms ahead, not a nickname. That's really what they called it. You cross the threshold and your sandals slap against sun-warmed stone, echoing too loudly. For a place full of corpses, it's surprisingly busy. Linen-clad priests move like clockwork, each carrying something fragrant, something steaming, or something sharp. You see brass knives, bundles of reeds, boxes of oils, and baskets of food that would look more at home in a peasant's kitchen than in the presence of a god king. That's the paradox. The dead in their afterlife temples eat more regularly and richly than most of the living. You trail one of the junior priests, a young man with kohl around his eyes and the eternal exhaustion of someone who's lit too many night lamps. He carries a tray of onions, bread beer, and curiously figs. Not exactly the feast of a god, but it's a start. He glances at you, once gives a nod, then turns down a hallway inscribed with the names of the deceased. You follow. Inside the offering chapel, it's quiet enough to hear the crackling of oil lamps. In the center, an offering table. Stone flat gently worn in the middle where the liquid offerings are poured. Behind it, a false door carved into the wall, just decorative but meaningful. It's believed the soul of the deceased can travel through it, or at least lean in from the beyond to accept the daily meal. The priest places the tray onto the table with deliberate reverence. You expect a whisper, maybe a chant. Instead, he reaches into his robes and retrieves a scroll, brittle and marked with signs older than memory. He begins to read. His voice is monotone, almost bored, but the words ripple with ancient magic. This isn't just a menu, it's a spell. The ancient Egyptians believed that the right food spoken correctly became real sustenance for the dead, not symbolically, actually. Bread 1 loaf, beer 1 jar, goose roasted 1, fig sweet many, and so on. Each item declared as though the mere naming conjures it in both realms. You stifle a smile as you imagine some grumpy caw, the soul double of a long-dead artisan crossing through the false door, sniffing the food, and thinking, bread again, no cheese. But you don't say that out loud. The dead are picky, and they hold grudges. A soft breeze rustles the linen curtain behind you, even though you're pretty sure the air was still a second ago. A chill brushes your ankle. You take a step back. The false door stands motionless, but still you feel watched. That's normal, you're told. Offerings attract attention, sometimes even from the wrong spirit. You walk into the next chamber and find another priest, a much older one this time, murmuring something you can't quite hear as he sprinkles natron onto a table. It's meant to purify the space. Not for the food, really, for the soul who's expected to arrive and eat it. You wonder, do they feel hunger? Or just the memory of it? Scholars still argue whether the Egyptian K needed food in a literal sense, or whether feeding was more about sustaining memory presence and cosmic order. What's clear is this skipping breakfast for the dead was a very bad idea. No matter what your modern stomach says, you're handed a tiny bowl of beer to carry, not drink carry. It's your contribution to the ceremony. You step forward and offer it to the statue of a woman whose name is too long to pronounce correctly. A noble woman. Her eyes painted in crushed lapis and soot gaze eternally past you. You whisper her name anyway. That's part of the gift. The room fills with light as the sun finally rises, touching the gold leaf on her headdress, and for a moment, just a moment, you wonder if the air behind the statue just shimmered. Maybe she liked the figs. You blink against the gold light filtering through slats in the temple walls. The room smells like a mixture of barley porridge goose fat and something faintly floral blue lotus, maybe, or the shadow of it drifting from the oil that was rubbed into the statue's stone shoulders just moments ago. A long corridor stretches ahead, and you're guided deeper into the complex. The walls whisper. No, not literally, but between the ancient inscriptions and the scratching footsteps of temple assistants, it feels like every sandstone block is murmuring prayers from a time when calendars didn't exist. You step into the sacred kitchen still cool before the day's full heat sets in. Here the work begins before the first yawn. Everything must be perfect. After all, you're cooking for eternity. It's not quiet anymore. The room hums softly with movement. Clay pots bubble on small fire pits, and women, yes, women move in practiced rhythms, rolling dough between their palms and sliding round loaves into dome ovens. Most people imagine priests when they think of temples, but feeding the dead was a team effort. And these bakers, they've been doing this so long, they probably know each ghost's favorite crust consistency. You lean against the wall, watching a woman with a rust-colored head sprinkle flour into a carved wooden trough. Her arms are strong. Her face lined her expression bored, in the way only someone who's prepared bread for both nobles and nether beings could be. She hums under her breath, a tune that's at least a few hundred years older than you. It sticks in your brain like molasses. One of the younger helpers, the kind who still flinches when the fire pops, drops a bowl. Clay shatters. Heads turn. You wince. And yet, no one scolds him. Just a weary glance from the flower woman, and a muttered, he better hope she wasn't listening. She, of course, being the lady of the tomb, the dead, the client, the one who will be feasting on this bread, or not feasting if it's burned late or handled without reverence. You pass by a row of offerings in progress, salted fish being wrapped in fig leaves, pigeon stews simmering beside thick barley beer, and baskets of onions braided like offerings to a deity which they kind of are. Everything here is both food and symbol. The liver may nourish the body, but it also represents clarity of thought. The goose wealth, the bread, the breath of life itself, even the water sacred, especially if it's drawn from the temple, well at the right hour, under the right chant. One of the cooks gestures toward a small fire pit. There a goose turns slowly on a spit. The firewood is scented with acacia, just enough to leave a sweetness in the air. You're told this one's going to the tomb of a particularly picky general one who always preferred his birds extra crisp. He was like that in life, too, someone mutters. Always sending complaints in dreams. Dream complaints. That's a thing here. If you skip or mess up an offering, you might not just feel bad. You might hear about it in your sleep. Ancient letters survive where living relatives wrote to their ancestors complaining that they'd been plagued with headaches, nightmares, even bad luck at work. All because the ghost of Uncle So-and-so wasn't getting his morning beer. It's the ultimate passive-aggressive haunting, no slamming doors, just persistent discomfort until you remember to bring a fig tart. You trail behind a priest carrying a tray of prepared foods. Dates goose, something that might be honeyed lentils. On top, nestled between bread loaves, is a small, folded piece of papyrus. You ask. He explains. It's the recitation list, he says simply. The ritual doesn't count unless you name the food. And it doesn't count unless it's said out loud in exactly the right phrasing. Apparently, the afterlife's delivery system is voice activated. You head down a side passage where the kitchen smoke clears and the air sharpens with myrrh. A line of boys in indigo tunics sits in the corridor, crushing dried herbs with bronze mortars. They're preparing incense powders. Sleepy, rhythmic grinding sounds echo down the stone hall. One of them yawns so widely his jaw cracks. He doesn't stop grinding. Never grind myrrh when yawning someone behind you whispers, "You'll invite a spirit to finish the task." You're not sure if that's a warning or just sleepy superstition. But the boy clamps his mouth shut pretty quickly. In another room, you spot someone painting food. Not preparing it, painting it. A scribe leans over a fresh tomb wall, drawing roasted meats, baskets of figs, and pitchers of beer with a steady hand and a brush of donkey hair. These drawings are food too, in a sense. The Egyptians believed depictions, when properly consecrated, could feed the soul in place of the real thing. Just one more way to make sure Grandma didn't go hungry on the other side. The scribe looks up and gives a slow blink, like he hasn't slept in a couple of weeks. She keeps changing her mind, he mutters. Last night she wanted lentils. Today she wants melons. There aren't even melons this time of year. You sympathize. The afterlife is eternal, but apparently it comes with cravings. As you leave the kitchen complex, the sun has crept higher, casting slanted gold across the floor. Trays are being wrapped, now tied with thin cords of papyrus and decorated with lotus petals. Everything's ready to be walked, yes, walked, to the offering chapel. No carts, no shortcuts. The dead like tradition. Your guide offers you a warm loaf, fresh from the oven. You hold it in your hands, amazed at how soft it is, how sweet it smells. Go ahead, he says with a smile. She won't miss one. Probably. But just as you raise it to your lips, you swear you feel a cold draft coil around your ankles again, like someone watching. You put the loaf down. Better not risk it. You follow the procession out of the kitchens and into the corridor of echoes, the hallway that leads to the first offering table of the day. The stone beneath your feet still holds the coolness of night, though the sunlight spilling through the high slits in the walls promises heat to come. You carry nothing, but you feel oddly responsible, like someone might tap your shoulder and ask if the barley paste is warm enough, or if the goose's wings were tied properly before roasting. Ahead of you, the priest in the russet sash leads with slow ceremonial steps. Two younger acolytes follow close behind, holding trays, balanced carefully on outstretched arms. They don't speak. No one does. The only sound is the faint slosh of beer in sealed jars and the occasional scuff of sandal leather. You pass painted columns, scarlet and teal lotuses climbing up to greet papyrus capitals, and slip quietly into the main chapel where today's first soul is waiting. Well, not waiting exactly. She's dead, but here that hardly seems like a stopping point. The light here is soft and golden, filtered through incense smoke that coils like tame snakes around your ankles. The offering table stands at the front, slightly worn from years of prayers and oily fingerprints, but still reverent in its simplicity. Behind it rises the central statue of the deceased Lady Nebet Emen, noblewoman of quiet power and supposedly excellent taste in honeyed dates. The statue is life-sized seated, made of black basalt, so polished it throws back the light like a mirror. Her eyes are inlaid with lapis, and her hands rest gracefully on her knees. You wonder how many breakfasts she's had here since her passing. 100, 1,000 more. The priest steps forward and begins the recitations. You're not surprised anymore that it starts with naming. Everything here begins with names. The food is called aloud, its quantity, its form, its intention. Bread beer, onions, roasted goose sweet cakes, incense, cool water figs, more bread. The list continues in a low rhythmic chant that makes your eyelids grow heavy. It's like a grocery list sung as a lullaby. You watch the tray settle onto the altar stone. The priest places each item with care, not because it's physically necessary, but because the placement means something. Left side for the ka, right side for the ba, perhaps, or maybe just tradition. In temples this old, the line between ritual and muscle memory blurs. You step closer, almost without realizing it, and something odd happens. Just as the priest invokes Lady Nebet Emen's lineage, a breeze curls through the chamber, not through the door, not through any opening you can see. Just a curl of air, like breath from an invisible mouth. It flutters the corner of the priest's sash and ruffles your sleeve before vanishing. No one reacts, which somehow makes it feel more real. You glance around, suddenly aware that the dead don't need fanfare. They slip in quietly, like they've always been here. Maybe they never left. Maybe the food and prayer are just reminders. Hey, we still remember you. Still know your favorite goose. Still say your name. You return your gaze to the offering table. Something about the arrangement catches your eye. It's symmetrical, beautiful, almost too perfect, like a still life frozen in time. The figs glisten, the beer jars sweat with coolness, and the bread looks exactly like the loaf you didn't dare eat earlier. You wonder, is the offering symbolic, or has it already been consumed in ways you can't see? Some say the soul doesn't eat the food the priest murmurs, almost like he's reading your thoughts. It absorbs the idea of the food, the form, like a dream. Others say it really eats. But on the inside, you nod slowly, pretending to understand. But your mind lingers on the words, absorbs the idea. Like how we remember tastes in dreams, or feel full from imaginary meals. You've had dreams like that, haven't you, waking up from a feast you never actually had, but still feeling like you did? You wander closer to the statue of Nebetaimen. The lapis in her eyes seems to glow faintly, and her smile is ambiguous, gracious perhaps, or just amused. The incense curls around her face, making her look momentarily alive. You can almost hear her voice. You remembered. Thank you. You step back, the echo fading. No one else seems to hear it. Behind you, another tray is prepared. This one's different, smaller, simpler. Just bread and water placed on a reed mat instead of a polished altar. It's for someone else, someone with fewer living relatives or less wealth. A man named Padi. The scribe reads his name aloud with the same care as the noblewoman's. Equal nourishment for unequal lives. That's one thing the afterlife corrects, at least here. You spot a small group of children, probably apprentice acolytes, watching wide-eyed from a corner. One of them holds a bundle of dried herbs tied with twine. Another carries a single lotus bud. Offerings can be simple, you realize, and still be accepted. What matters is the intention. Someone once fed the dead with words alone. There's an old story, a fringe legend, that a poor farmer unable to offer food simply sat at the tomb each morning and whispered his favorite meals aloud. And still, the ghost came to thank him in a dream. He had tasted through memory shared joy and love. You like that version better? A low chime signals the end of the recitation. The food remains in place, though some say the ka has already fed. The priest bows low. You follow suit, your head dipping toward the cool floor, and for a moment the silence is complete. No birds, no wind, just the hush of gratitude from a world you can't see. And just when you think the ceremony is over, a final act takes place. The youngest acolyte steps forward bearing a tiny brazier. He sets it on the altar and lights the last piece of incense. The smoke rises slowly silver against the morning light, and the priest whispers, "May your mouth never dry. May your spirit never hunger. May you rise with the sun." You feel something shift, not in the room, but in yourself. Maybe you didn't believe coming in. Maybe part of you still doesn't. But now you've seen how carefully the dead are fed. You felt the quiet joy of a name spoken with love. You've watched bread become a bridge between worlds, and somewhere in the stillness of that stone chamber you think someone smiled. You wake to the soft shuffling of sandals against stone. The air is cooler than expected, thick with shadow and stillness, like the temple itself hasn't quite decided whether it wants to wake up yet. You're not in the kitchens anymore. You're deeper now. Past the clatter of pots and soft-spoken squabbles over stew pots, past the perfumed chaos of goose feathers and barley sacks. You're standing at the threshold of something quieter. The door before you is tall and squared, framed by painted images of Anubis and Thoth, both mid-step, as if they've been caught gliding just outside your line of sight. Their eyes follow you, one painted in profile, the other staring head-on. You hesitate, then step through. Welcome to the inner chapel. The room isn't large, but it feels vast because of the silence. The floor is smooth limestone, the walls inscribed with prayers so old even the priests reciting them now probably don't understand every word. Candles flicker low and smoky, their flames casting long, sleepy shadows on the wall. The space is calm, not holy in a thunderclap kind of way, but holy like a library no one's dared to rearrange for 1,000 years. In the center stands the false door, a central feature in tomb chapels. It's not a real door, of course. You couldn't walk through it, but it's carved and painted as if you could. Raised panels, columns, lintels, and at the center, the name of the deceased carved in neat, solemn hieroglyphs. Santa Gem servant in the place of truth. His statue waits nearby, seated serene and symmetrical. Carved from sycamore wood, the same reddish tone as the earth, just outside the tomb's threshold. You wonder how long he's sat like that. How many mornings he's been offered warm beer and fresh bread by priests who never knew his name in life. You watch now as today's offering begins. A priest, this one older, with a shaved head and a sash stained slightly from oil, or time steps up to the altar with the scroll. The same one, or maybe a copy of the one you saw earlier. These things aren't improvised. They're memorized, repeated, drilled into memory like lullabies for the afterlife. His voice rises flat but powerful. PD Estaru. An offering which the king gives, the standard opening. A phrase so ancient, even when it was first spoken, it echoed with reverence. This spell doesn't ask, it commands. The king, alive or dead, gives the offering through divine right, and the gods accept on behalf of the deceased. It's a bureaucratic arrangement, but mystical in that deeply Egyptian way. You glance at the table: goose, bread, leeks, 2 tiny fish, a wedge of white cheese, a lump of honeycomb so golden it seems to shine on its own. The incense burner curls a single strand of smoke toward the roofless sky, and the priest continues. May he be given bread and beer oxen and foul alabaster and clothing every good and pure thing. You notice a shift in the room. It's not sound, not movement, but presence. It's like the air thickens around the false door. Not threatening, not cold, just there. A slow turning inward, as though something has paused to listen. And maybe it has. The opening of the mouth ceremony was only supposed to be performed once at the funeral itself. But over time, especially among the wealthy or the well-remembered, it became ritualized, repeated, symbolic, but no less sacred. This version is lighter, less dramatic. There's no special tool, no adze or ritual knife. But the motion is similar. A priest approaches the statue. He holds a narrow stick dipped in natron. With one hand, he touches the lips of the statue. Just a tap, a suggestion, and he whispers something under his breath. You can't hear the words, but you feel their weight. Scholars still argue what this really meant. Was it magic metaphor? A way to reawaken the soul's senses every morning, like some divine caffeine ritual? Or was it a cosmic reminder, a gentle tap on the statue's mouth, telling the spirit, hey, breakfast is here? You glance back at the table. Nothing's changed. And yet, the bread seems warmer. The beer smells richer. The honey is so bright, it makes your teeth ache just to look at it. Maybe you're imagining it. Or maybe the offerings have been accepted, tasted, if not eaten, taken if not removed. The priest concludes the reading with a final list of blessings. May he walk among the stars. May he drink beside Osiris. May his ba return each morning like the sun itself. You look up. You hadn't noticed the carving above the false door, the sun disk flanked by wings. Beneath it, the scarab beetle Kipri, the one who rolls the sun across the sky each morning. Rebirth, return, routine. It clicks into place. These offerings, they're not just for sustenance. They're anchors. They keep the soul tied to the rhythm of the living world. Sunrise, bread prayer, beer sunset, sleep. It's comfort, continuity, divine repetition, like brushing your teeth. But with incense and honey cakes, you step back and feel the smoothness of the wall against your shoulders. The sandstone is cool, and beneath it, just a few feet down, is the real tomb, the actual body, the one wrapped in linens painted with protective spells, surrounded by amulets and Shabti figurines carved to do his chores in the next world. He's down there and up here, and according to the ritual in both places at once. The Ka eats the bread, the Ba soars like a bird, the name is spoken, the statue is touched, the spell is recited, the soul lives. You close your eyes, and in the darkness you hear chewing. You keep your eyes shut a moment longer, half expecting another sound, a breath, a shuffle, maybe even a quiet sigh of satisfaction from the other side. But all that greets you is stillness. When you open your eyes, the priest is bowing low, his hands pressed together, murmuring a line of farewell. The offerings remain on the table, untouched by visible hands. And yet, they seem changed, less vibrant somehow. Dimmed, as if the act of feeding has already occurred not by consumption, but by contact. The soul doesn't take the food in a physical sense. It doesn't need to. It draws meaning from it. Essence, memory. You watch as an attendant steps forward with a fresh linen cloth and begins covering the food. It won't be discarded immediately. That comes later. For now, it rests infused with sacred intent, its spiritual value already extracted like warmth from tea leaves. You follow the priest out into the corridor again. Your sandals brush over hieroglyphs carved into the floor. Names, prayers, invocations. One reads, "To speak the name of the dead is to make them live again." A simple rule, but also a powerful one. The dead don't require oxygen or blood. They require remembrance. Your guide, a different priest, now this one younger, with sunburned skin and a slight limp, nods at the inscription. That's why we feed them, he says. Not just food. Words. We say their names, say their favorite dishes, talk about the day they died and the goose they couldn't finish. That's how they eat. He chuckles softly, adding, "The dead are sentimental eaters." You smile, and something in your chest loosens. You pass another offering chamber, this one already in mid-ritual. A cluster of priests chants in unison. Their voices rise and fall, like waves, a cadence so slow and steady, you almost mistake it for snoring. The room smells of cinnamon bark and roasted fish. You pause at the doorway, observing from the edge. This deceased is different. A priestess, you think? The statue is slim, draped in fine linen carved to mimic real folds. She holds a sistrum, an instrument of joy, in one hand and a scroll in the other. Her lips are curved in the slightest smile, the kind that suggests she always knew something you didn't. The offerings here are sparse, just a bowl of dates, a cup of wine, and a single white lily floating in water. You whisper to yourself, less is more. And maybe in her case, that's true. Not all spirits need a feast. Some just need a flower. You continue down the hall into a sunlit courtyard where the temple breathes a little easier. Here, birds wheel overhead, and two temple cats slink across the stones with the self-importance of minor deities. One pauses to stare at you with narrowed eyes. You wonder if it's just a cat or someone visiting. There's a priest seated beneath a fig tree, reading a scroll aloud to no one in particular. Or maybe he is reading to someone you just can't see them. The text is a biography, apparently, a record of the dead man's life. He worked as a scribe, loved honey beer, once built a perfect papyrus boat that floated from the temple to the Nile without taking on a drop of water. It capsized later, but that part's not included. The priest reads slowly, reverently pausing at key phrases like a storyteller delivering the punchline of a very old joke. He never missed a festival. He played the lute badly. His wife said his barley cakes were edible at best. You grin. This is memory as offering. Laughter as tribute. Just like with the bread and beer the spirit takes in the sweetness of being known. You look up and catch a shimmer of heat on the far wall. A trick of the sun, or maybe a listening soul warmed by the retelling. Scholars still debate whether these rituals were meant to literally nourish the dead or whether they were really for the living. A way to cope, a structure for grief, a rhythm to the unbearable silence of loss. But here, beneath the fig tree, it doesn't feel like coping. It feels like hospitality. You find a shaded bench and sit for a while. Watch the courtyard fill with soft noises, the crunch of sandaled feet, the pluck of a lyre somewhere distant, the faint splash of water poured into a libation jar. These are quiet, faithful sounds, reassuring, rhythmic. One of the temple boys brings you a small dish, 3 dates, a folded napkin of papyrus, and a pinch of sweet herbs. Guest offering, he explains, in case someone's spirit is walking with you. You glance behind you. No one's there. Still, you place the dish gently on the edge of the bench just in case. It seems polite. You stand once more, stretching your back beneath the dappled shadows of the fig tree. The bench is warm where you sat, but the breeze is gentle now, carrying the subtle aroma of herbs and incense. You nod to the temple boy in thanks and continue along a narrow passage that curves inward, leading you back into the heart of the complex. Now the rooms grow darker again. Not ominous, just hushed. The walls are thicker here, the windows smaller. What little light there is comes from bronze oil lamps spaced at precise intervals. You're told this section of the temple houses private offering chambers reserved for families who sponsor daily rituals in exchange for eternal remembrance. You enter one now. The chamber is barely the size of a modern bathroom, and yet it feels vast with symbolism. The false door is simpler, carved but unpainted. There's no grand statue, just a painted wooden stela showing a man and a woman seated side by side at a low table, both reaching for food that looks vaguely like bread, or maybe pies, or maybe both. You can't quite tell, but that's part of the charm. The table before the stela is real, and on it rests a tray with today's offerings: a cup of milk, a triangle of cheese, a single onion. Sparse but intentional. The priest here is younger, perhaps a novice, and he reads the ritual text more cautiously, stumbling over a few phrases. His voice trembles slightly on the deceased's name, but he finishes strong. You feel something tugging in your chest. Not sadness, not fear, just tenderness. This offering is small, but you can sense the care behind it. Maybe it was requested by a great-great-grandchild. Maybe the priest is a descendant. Or maybe the soul being fed simply meant enough in life that someone still funds their breakfast 3 centuries later. That's the thing no one tells you about feeding the dead. It's not just piety. It's affection. It's saying, I still remember what you liked. I still know how you took your milk. You reach for the lintel and trace your fingers across the carved name Merit-Ptah. Her name means beloved of Ptah. You whisper it aloud, as softly as you can. The flame in the oil lamp flickers and then steadies. You leave without a sound. Further in the corridor, you come across something unexpected, a mirror. Not the modern kind. This one is bronze polished to a low gleam, its edges engraved with protective symbols. It leans against the wall beside a shelf of folded linens and herbal sachets. One of the priestesses steps forward and explains, "We use it to check ourselves before entering the purification rooms. The soul sees everything. It's polite to be tidy." You glance into the mirror. The lighting is soft, your reflection slightly warped by the curve of the bronze. You look tired, reverent, slightly dusty. A person walking through someone else's memory. You smile faintly. The mirror returns it. Beyond this point is the purification space. You step inside and instantly feel the difference. The air is heavy with steam. There's a long trough carved into the floor where warm water runs constantly fed by an underground cistern. White-robed attendants move silently here, sprinkling natron into the water, adding leaves of mint and lotus for fragrance. Everything here is cleansing, not just for the living, but for the offerings themselves. Before the food reaches the altar, it must be purified, touched by water, blessed by intention. You kneel at the edge of the trough and dip your hands into the flow. It's warmer than expected, silky with minerals. As you wash a memory, surfaces something about your grandmother, perhaps, or the way she used to rinse rice in the morning sunlight. You're not sure why you remember it now. Maybe the room evokes that kind of connection, that closeness across time. A priest dips bundles of reeds into the trough, then shakes them gently over a set of offerings: beans, grapes, garlic. The water droplets catch the lamplight like tiny stars. He murmurs something under his breath. You lean closer. He's not reciting a formal spell. He's speaking to someone, telling them about the weather, about how hot it's going to be by midday, about the pigeons that nested in the eaves last week and left feathers all over the bread baskets. And then softly, "We saved your seat." It breaks your heart a little, and yet it heals too. You step back, letting the water drip from your fingers. You feel lighter, more grounded, as if you've just brushed fingertips with someone across the veil. Not enough to grasp, just enough to greet. Outside, the sun has climbed higher. The light is stronger, more golden. The temple breathes a little faster now, and so do you. You return to the central hallway where the smell of warm bread mixes with oil and frankincense. It's nearly time for the next ritual. Another soul, another name, another breakfast. And still, no one hurries. Because eternity, like a proper Egyptian offering, must be served at the right pace. Your steps return you to the broad central colonnade, the quiet artery that connects this entire place of spirit and routine. The pillars here are monumental, reaching toward a ceiling painted midnight blue and speckled with stars that never move. Each column is carved with prayers and the names of patrons' names meant to be spoken until the stars themselves vanish. You glance up and see a flock of doves coasting lazily overhead, their wings flashing white in the shafts of sun that slip through slotted windows high in the stone. Their cooing echoes gentle and low, not disruptive, more like lullabies for souls that drift just behind the walls. The temple is alive, but with the quiet life of memory. A senior priest meets you here. His robes impeccably folded his face, lined with the kind of patience that comes from reciting the same words every day for 50 years and still meaning them. He walks with you to a side courtyard, smaller, more intimate. The space is shaded by woven mats stretched between columns. The floor is mosaic little shards of colored stone pressed into images of palms, lotuses, and spiraling sun disks. In the center is a single offering slab, far simpler than the altars inside. On it, a single bowl of lentil stew steams softly in the morning air. Sometimes the priest says, "We feed the forgotten." You raise an eyebrow. There are always names lost to time, he continues. People buried without stone, without descendants, without coin for a priest to name them. He sits beside the bowl and pours a little beer into the dust. The ground drinks it quickly. The offering isn't for any one soul. It's for all of them. You sit too. The breeze picks up. You feel it curl past your ear, tug at your sleeve, ruffle your hair, like a parent brushing something off your shoulder. You exhale slowly. The forgotten are never fully forgotten here. He turns to you, eyes soft. Do you want to say a name? You blink. You weren't expecting the question. But the answer comes easily. You speak the name of someone from your own memory. A grandmother, perhaps, or a teacher, or someone whose face has softened into dream shape. You say it aloud, like an offering. The wind lifts again, and you know, in your bones, that they heard it. Later, you follow a procession of acolytes through the long back passage of the temple. They carry baskets, now collecting the food that has already been offered. In the Egyptian system, once the spirit has drawn the essence from the meal, the physical remains aren't wasted. They're either consumed by priests or distributed to the poor, depending on the temple, the sponsor, the season. A kind of divine recycling. You're invited to help. You carry a tray of bread down a side path where a group of villagers waits respectfully outside the temple gates. They don't speak. They know what this food is. Sacred leftovers. Blessed crumbs. The taste of memory. A young girl accepts your tray. She smiles without showing teeth. Her eyes flick to the sky as if to thank someone up there. Then she disappears into the crowd, bread in hand. You walk back into the temple and notice the difference now. It's subtle, but real. The space has quieted. The rituals are done for the morning. Offerings made, souls remembered, prayers spoken. The air is softer. You swear the stones themselves seem lighter, like they've exhaled. You pause in front of a wall, carving a scene of offering from 1,000 years ago. A priest holds out a loaf to a seated woman. The woman's eyes are calm, her hands extended. You recognize her name. You've heard it today. Maybe not this exact name, but close. Always close. And as you stare at the image, the carving seems to ripple. For just a breath, the bread looks fresh. The priest's hand looks warm. The woman looks pleased. And then it's just stone again. But you understand now, feeding the dead isn't a one-time thing. It isn't a grand mystical act of spectacle. It's something quieter, something domestic, mundane even. It's remembering to say someone's name when no one else will. It's offering a meal not to be eaten, but to be shared in spirit. It's saying you mattered, and somehow, in all of this, you feel fuller too. The temple begins to empty, the way a market empties after dusk. One ritual remains a final offering to the gods who oversee the dead. The high priest performs this one himself, beneath a canopy embroidered with gold thread stars. You stand just beyond the entrance, watching as he raises a small golden bowl and tips a handful of resin into the brazier. The flame flares, then steadies, sending up a plume of sweet choking smoke. It curls around the carved god standing sentinel on the walls, Osiris, Isis, Anubis, all painted with perfect attention to beauty and balance. The priest lifts his voice in a tone deeper than all the others. This one isn't a grocery list. It's not a name reading. It's gratitude, a thank you to the gods who lend their ears, to the spirits who still show up for breakfast, to the breath of the world that keeps rising with each sun. As the words end, the last smoke spirals upward. You watch it reach the top of the chamber, then vanish. You step outside into the growing heat. You are not the same person who entered this temple. Your skin is dustier. Your shoulders ache. Your hands smell like incense and dough. And your heart, it's steadier, quieter. You've learned how to feed the dead, but you've also learned how to remember. The sun is higher now, late morning in the desert, when shadows shrink and the stones begin to breathe heat. You leave the inner chambers behind and walk toward the eastern portico, guided by the same slow rhythm of temple life that you've begun to feel in your bones. There's no rushing here, no urgency. Even the priests move with a softness that feels practiced, deliberate, like every step is part of the offering. You arrive at another courtyard, though this one feels more functional than sacred. It's quieter and the walls are lower, giving you a view of the open desert beyond. Here, several temple workers gather near a row of low tables. They're preparing something unusual. This isn't for a god. Not exactly, and not for a noble spirit. This meal is for a statue. You tilt your head puzzled. A priest with a streak of gray in his beard explains, "We refresh the senses of the deceased every few days, especially in households with personal shrines or tomb statues. If you don't feed the statue, the Ka may go wandering." He smiles, but you can't quite tell if he's joking. You walk closer. The table holds bowls of water, perfumed oils, barley paste, and a few pieces of fruit arranged into a small pyramid. It looks more like a spa kit than a breakfast tray. One priest lifts a jug of cool water and begins to pour it slowly over the feet of a seated wooden figure, a likeness of a man long dead. His eyes painted wide, his skin lacquered into a permanent bronze hue. The statue doesn't move. Of course not. But something about the water slipping over its carved toes makes you feel like you're intruding on something intimate. Like bathing someone while they sleep. Do they feel this, you ask softly? The priest shrugs. Maybe, maybe not. But they notice when we stop, and somehow that's worse. You step back as the ceremony continues. A soft cloth is used to anoint the statue's hands. A pinch of myrrh is tucked behind its ear. A single date is pressed gently into the statue's open palm, then removed, never bitten, never tasted, but offered all the same. This is the opening of the mouth again, but in miniature. Not the grand public ritual performed with adzas and incantations. This is the daily version. Quiet, practical, repetitive, a kind of spiritual maintenance. One priest gestures to a shelf on the far wall where dozens of small wooden figures line up, each with a name carved beneath. We rotate them, he says. Each gets washed, anointed, and offered food in turn. It's not much, but it's something. You look closely. Some of the names are familiar, some aren't. One figure, a woman with a faded blue headscarf painted across her carved brow, catches your eye. Her hands are raised in a gesture of speech. Her feet are broken, the lacquer flaking at the edges. The name beneath her has been worn nearly smooth. She still gets fed, the priest says gently, even if no one remembers her name anymore. You feel your throat tighten. You sit on the floor nearby and watch as the ceremony continues. No one rushes. The oils are applied slowly. The words are spoken softly. The air smells like beeswax and juniper, and something faintly citrus. It's the scent of care, of deliberate touch, of time measured not in minutes, but in kindness. You start to see the routine for what it is, a rhythm, not just of ritual, but of relationship. The dead aren't distant here. They're part of the household. Guests, yes, but also family. You don't offer food out of fear. You do it because, how could you not? One of the younger attendants leans in to whisper. She liked sweet beer. That one, he nods toward the broken-footed statue. She used to drink more than her husband, they say. He'd fall asleep, and she'd keep sipping until the moon went down. You laugh quietly. The statue doesn't smile. But something in the air feels warmer. Elsewhere in the courtyard, a set of clay tablets is being arranged. You approach curiously. Each bears a different spell, written in flowing, confident glyphs. A scribe sits beside them, checking them off against a long inventory list. These are the feeding spells, he says. Standard formulas. We loan them out to households who can't afford temple services. You raise an eyebrow. Loan, he shrugs. You write them down. You recite them. You return the tablet. Some people copy them onto their own walls. It's better than nothing. You pick one up. The clay is warm from the sun. The glyphs read, "May the soul be full. May the mouth open wide. May the heart be glad." A simple prayer. You like it. In a corner of the courtyard, a woman kneels beside a small brick shrine. It's clearly homemade, no gold leaf, no fancy carving. Just a niche in the wall with a painted slab, a few sprigs of mint, and a chipped cup half full of watered wine. She's whispering. You walk closer and hear the cadence of her voice, though not the words. It's not a recitation. It's conversation. She's talking to someone. When she finishes, she places a single slice of dried fig into the cup bows, her head, and turns to go. You glance at the name, etched on the slab, Hui, farmer, beloved father. You whisper it to yourself. Just once, Hui. There's a rustle in the air behind you. Not a wind exactly, but a hush. A hush that feels acknowledged. The final part of the day's statue rituals involves fire. Back near the altar, a brazier has been lit. A priest sprinkles powdered herbs into the flame, sending bursts of blue-green smoke into the air. The smell is sharp awakening, not sleepy like frankincense, but something electric. Basil acacia root. The fire crackles loudly. It's the only sound in the courtyard now. A final loaf is tossed into the flame, not burned in full, just kissed by fire. Enough to send its essence upward. Smoke offering, scent meal, spirit nourishment. You close your eyes and breathe in deeply. The scent fills your lungs and does something strange to your memory. You think of old kitchens, of morning fog, of someone laughing long ago. You can't place the memory. Maybe it isn't yours. Maybe you're just catching the echo of someone else's offering. You open your eyes. The fire dims. The ceremony is over, but the scent lingers. You linger too. You sit for a while longer in the warmth of the courtyard, watching the smoke slowly dissolve into the midday air. Somewhere beyond the walls, the Nile moves silent and slow, threading its ancient path through the desert like a ribbon through linen. You don't need to see it to know it's there, just like you don't need to see the souls to know they've been fed. Eventually, the silence shifts again, not breaking, but bending. A low hum begins to rise from the western corridor. You rise and follow it instinctively, your footsteps soft against the worn stone, your breathing beginning to match the gentle cadence of voices ahead. What you find isn't a formal ritual this time. It's a classroom. A group of young acolytes, barely older than children, sits cross-legged in a semicircle. They each hold scraps of pottery with smooth surfaces called ostraca, and they're tracing out glyphs with reed pens dipped in charcoal water. A teacher stands at the front reciting the standard offering formula over and over. They repeat it with sleepy mouths and ink-stained fingers. An offering which the king gives. Again, an offering which the king gives. You linger near the doorway, unnoticed. The teacher doesn't look up. As she walks the line checking their posture, their brush strokes the way their lips wrap around the oldest words in this land. They aren't just memorizing lines. They're transmitting belief, preserving rhythm, rehearsing care. These children may one day chant these very spells to statues, to names that haven't yet been carved, to souls that haven't yet passed. You watch one boy frown as he smudges a glyph. He wipes the surface redraws and whispers the line again, softer now, more reverently. Like he's realizing even now that the words aren't just ink, they're nourishment. After the lesson ends, the teacher invites you to sit with her for a moment under the colonnade. She offers you a cup of warm date water, thick and sweet, and gestures for you to drink. You've seen the formal offerings, she says, her voice gentle and low. The goose, the beer, the bread piled like temple walls. But sometimes the dead eat through stories. You sip and listen. There's an old tale. She begins of a poor family who couldn't afford even one loaf to offer their father. So each night the eldest son would gather his siblings and tell the story of their father's life. They would sit in a circle and speak aloud what he loved: roasted garlic, sun-warmed figs, the sound of temple bells. She smiles softly, and they would each pretend to set those things on a plate before them. They'd say, "Here's your beer, Father. It's sweet today. Here's your fish. It's still warm." And each night he would visit them in dreams, smiling, full. You close your eyes a moment. It's not hard to imagine. Do you think the dead can really hear us, you ask? She doesn't answer immediately. Instead, she gestures to a nearby pillar, where a tiny shrine has been carved into the base. It's worn, faded, easy to overlook. But there it is, a bowl, an old cup, and a name barely legible. He has been spoken for over 700 years, she says. That is enough. She rises, dusts her robes, and returns to her students. You leave the classroom and continue through a corridor painted with soft hues, terracotta, faded green, indigo. The frescoes here depict dreams, not gods, not offerings, just people sleeping. A woman on a mat beside a brazier, a man with his head resting on a carved pillow, children curled up beside dogs, and above each sleeping figure, wisps shaped like birds rising from their mouths. The ba, the part of the soul that leaves the body each night to wander. The Egyptians believed this part of us could visit the gods, fly to distant tombs, receive news from ancestors, or cause trouble depending on your mood. You pause before one painting. A woman sleeps with a smile on her face, and her paw hovers above, carrying a tiny offering tray in its claws, miniature bread, miniature jar of beer. A ghost with groceries. You love that image. You step into a side room where dream interpretation once took place. It's empty now, but the bench is still there, smooth from centuries of seated seekers. You sit. The room is cool, quiet, as if preserved in its own slowness. A faint perfume lingers, lotus and cedar. You imagine what it was like coming here with questions about a dream. Did the voice mean something? Was that shadow your grandmother? Or just the wind? One theory still debated today suggests that dreams were used by the dead to request offerings, to nudge the living, to say, "Remember me, bake the bread, say the name." You look down at your hands and wonder if any of your dreams have ever been whispers from someone forgotten. If the old woman you dreamed of, once seated at your childhood kitchen table, wasn't just invention, but invitation. Another room, another scent. You follow it. You're led into a chamber reserved for scent-based offerings. That's right. The dead had favorite smells too. A woman named Hennet leads the ritual today. She wears a dress dyed the color of pomegranate skin, and her arms are stacked with bracelets that whisper as she moves. On a small table beside her are pouches filled with crushed herbs, resins, flowers, and bits of wood. She opens each one and waves a bit under her nose, then chooses carefully. Cinnamon, myrrh, blue lotus, dried orange peel. These were his favorites, she says, nodding toward a statue of a man smiling with a kind of calm mischief, especially the cinnamon. He was a baker. She sprinkles the blend onto a small fire brick, which hisses and curls upward in a plume of gold smoke. You watch it rise toward the statue's face. The scent is incredible, warming sweet, and just a little earthy. You find yourself inhaling deeply without realizing. And as the smell surrounds you, memories rise unbidden. A wooden table, your hands dusted with flour, someone humming. It's not your memory. Or maybe it is. Scent travels in time. And here, it's a kind of food. You ask Hanut if she ever hears from the dead. She laughs not unkindly. All the time, she says, but mostly in smells. She packs the herbs back into their pouch and says no more. Back in the main colonnade, the temple has begun its midday lull. The air grows heavier. Even the doves seem to quiet. You sit beneath a canopy of woven reeds and watch the sky fade into a pale gold. A small girl passes by with a tray of clay figurines, shabti, little servant dolls meant to work for the dead in the afterlife. Most are plain, some are painted. She offers you one. You turn it over in your hand. The back is inscribed, "If I am called, I shall answer." You set the figure gently on the stone beside you. No one calls right now, but you know, if they did, someone would answer. The heat of the day settles over the temple like a wool blanket, thick, soft, inescapable. The priests have retreated to shadowed alcoves, and even the cats lie flattened under the lip of a sun-warmed step. You wander slowly through the western wing, where the air grows cooler, not because of wind, but because of stone. These halls are deeper, more insulated. The walls here are older. You can feel it. There's a change in tone, too. Up until now, the rituals have been rhythmic routine, almost domestic. But here, the atmosphere shifts. It's still reverent, still careful, but now there's a hush that leans heavier, like the pause before a story turns serious. You are about to witness a feeding not of a noble or a priestess, but of a god king, a pharaoh. The chamber you step into is vast ceiling arched with painted constellations, floor inlaid with alabaster that seems to glow from within. The columns are massive, shaped like bundled papyrus stalks, and the scent of kefi incense hangs in the air like velvet. You breathe deeply. The perfume is layered: honey, wine, myrrh, juniper, cinnamon, frankincense, sweet and smoky and intoxicating. You feel suddenly very small. The statue of the pharaoh sits at the far end of the chamber beneath a golden canopy. Carved from obsidian, it catches no light. It swallows it. The eyes are inlaid with electrum, and they follow you with a calm that borders on unsettling. You can't tell if it's judgment or amusement. Either way, you keep your voice low as you step closer. The offerings here are abundant. An entire ox roasted and laid on a bronze tray. 4 kinds of bread, 3 of beer, 2 of wine. Whole baskets of fruits, pomegranates, dates, figs, grapes, olives, spices in carved ivory jars, flowers, papyrus scrolls, even music. A group of musicians play softly in the background: a harp, a flute, a hand drum. The melody is slow, haunting. You sit quietly near a pillar as the priests begin the ritual. This is no small operation. At least a dozen priests move in precise formation. Each has a task. One lays the food. One lights the incense. One reads the offerings aloud. One sprinkles sacred water drawn from the Nile at dawn. Another fans the air gently with ostrich plumes. You can see the logic, the beauty, in the choreography. This is not about feeding a dead man. This is about maintaining cosmic order. To the Egyptians, the pharaoh wasn't just a ruler. He was a bridge, a point of connection between gods and people life and death, heaven and earth. And even in death, he had responsibilities. If he is nourished, the sun will rise. If he is remembered, the floods will come. If he is pleased, the fields will yield. That's the weight of this breakfast. It's not ceremonial, it's necessary. You watch as the officiating priest, an elder with white eyebrows and hands like cracked papyrus, raises the most sacred vessel, a cup of sweet beer mixed with pomegranate syrup. He whispers a spell as he pours a drop onto the floor. The sound is quiet, but clear liquid on stone. The silence afterward is immediate. You swear the air pulses, then movement, not from the statue, but around it. A shift, a momentary flicker, like the world blinking. You blink too, and the feeling passes. The priest sets the cup on the altar and steps back. Another priest begins the reading of names, not just the pharaoh's, but those of his ancestors, his wives, his children, his generals, his builders, his tutors, his scribes. It takes time. Each name is pronounced with care, and in that care, you feel the weight of eternity. Tutankhaten, known later as Tutankhamun, beloved of Amun, lord of the rising sun. Enkisenamun, daughter of Nefertiti, singer of the housekeeper of the temple. Horemheb, who guarded the gates, whose arms held the scroll. Each name is a torch in a dark tunnel. Each name is a mouthful of bread. You realize that this ritual isn't just about sustaining the soul. It's about sustaining memory, the oldest form of immortality. You sit with that thought as the ceremony concludes. The musicians fall silent. The priests bow in unison. The food remains in place, but you can almost see the essence of it already gone, lifted like steam into another world. One young priest, barely more than a boy, approaches the statue and places a single lotus flower at its feet. A gesture not in the manual. But no one corrects him. You imagine the soul of the pharaoh, wherever it may be, pausing a moment to acknowledge the offering, and perhaps smiling. You're guided next to a room. Few outsiders see the scroll archive. This is where the offering lists are kept, hundreds of them on papyrus linen or carved into wood. Each list is tied to a name, a statue, a tomb, or even a single wall carving. Feeding the dead was a legal obligation as much as a spiritual one. The lists kept it all straight. You sit beside a scribe as he unrolls a scroll. The ink is dark brown, faded in spots, but still legible. He points to a column of hieroglyphs and explains, "This one was written for a man named Jehudamos. He was a temple baker, not rich, not noble, but he was beloved by the workers. After he died, they pooled their money to pay for a daily offering. 2 loaves, 1 jar of beer, every morning." You run your fingers lightly over the edge of the scroll. "Did it last?" you ask. The scribe shrugs. "For about 20 years. Then the funds ran out." But he unrolls the scroll further. "A young apprentice continued it, secretly. He stole bread from the kitchen and offered it in the corner room." You feel your chest tighten. "What happened to him?" The scribe smiles. "He died young. Fever. But when we cleaned out his things, we found a second scroll." He holds it up, written in a child's hand, wobbly but careful. "I offer this bread so Jehudamos won't be hungry. And so he'll remember me." You can't speak for a moment. Then you ask quietly, "Do you still feed him?" The scribe nods. "We say his name every mid-season festival. It's not much, but it's something." You leave the archive with the weight of history pressing softly against your back. Not heavy, just grounding. The temple is alive with echoes. Not in the ghostly sense, in the musical sense. The notes of each name, each meal, each whisper, it all lingers in the air, like a song with no end. You walk back to the central colonnade and see a group of pilgrims lighting small clay lamps, one for each ancestor. They place them in a line along the edge of the walkway, and as the flames flicker, their faces soften. Some cry, some smile, some just sit in silence. One child speaks aloud. "This is for my grandfather. He liked lentils and honey." And in that moment, the air shimmers. The name was said, the offering was made, the soul is fed, and the world for now is whole. By now, the light has turned amber. The heat of the day begins to loosen its grip on the stone, and the temple sighs beneath the weight of memory. You walk slowly now, partly from fatigue, partly from reverence. Every hallway feels like a story. Every doorway, like a threshold between this world and something older, quieter, deeper. You find yourself following a winding path behind the main chapel, led by an older woman with a crooked spine and eyes that seem to see both past and present at once. She doesn't introduce herself. She just beckons. "This way," she says softly. They're waiting. You don't ask who. You pass a wall carved with rows of names, hundreds of them, each one framed in a rectangle like a house for the soul. These aren't kings or nobles. These are artisans, builders, bakers, the ones who shaped stone and bread and dreams. These are the quiet ones, she tells you. They don't ask for much, but we remember them. You enter a dim chamber where the walls glow gold in the lamplight. There are no statues here, no offering tables, just shelves, hundreds of them stacked with small soul jars. Each jar is painted with a name and a symbol, a goose, a loaf, a feather, a rising sun. Some are simple clay, others glazed in blue or green. Some have lids shaped like lotus buds, others shaped like animal heads. Each holds something sacred. You ask what's inside. Whispers, she says, bits of linen, a pinch of ash, a note, a prayer. something left behind by someone who cared. She lifts one jar gently from the shelf and holds it close to her cheek. "This one is warm," she murmurs. Someone remembered her this morning. You sit on a woven mat as she begins her rounds. She doesn't chant. She doesn't recite. She talks. To each jar, she speaks a name and a greeting. Some are brief, morning Jed. Still cool today, isn't it? Hapu others are longer, small stories. Fragments of life. Your niece had a son. Named him after you. Your fig tree bloomed again. 5 blossoms. I made your stew last week. Forgot the garlic. It wasn't the same. You watch motionless. This isn't ceremony. This is love. She finishes the shelf and turns to you. "You may try," she says, gesturing toward the row behind you. You hesitate, but then you choose a jar at random. The name is Bakatmut. The symbol is a fish. You close your eyes and speak. "Bakatmut. I hope someone fed you something salty today. I hope you still love water. I hope your name never stops echoing." You don't hear a reply, but the lamp beside you flickers just once. That's enough. Later, you're brought to an outdoor court, not large, but sunlit and scattered with stone benches. It's a resting space meant for the living. You see visitors here, an old man holding a tray of raisins, a young woman scribbling notes onto a wax tablet, 2 children chasing a chicken that has no interest in being caught. And in the center, beneath a canopy of reeds, sits a storyteller. His voice is low and musical. His beard is long. His sandals are worn. He doesn't look like a priest, but everyone listens when he speaks. Today's story is an old one. A man forgets to feed his grandfather's soul for 7 days. On the 8th, he dreams of being lost in the desert, thirsty and chased by jackals. He wakes, pours a cup of beer, places a piece of cheese beside it, and says the name. That night, his grandfather appears in a dream, not angry, just tired. He takes the beer, eats the cheese, then leaves a single word behind. "Thanks." The children giggle. The old man wipes his eye. The woman scribbles the ending onto her tablet. And the chicken somehow finally gets caught. You sit beside the storyteller afterward. He looks at you with eyes like ink and says, "The dead don't need much, but they do need us." You walk again. The temple unfolds and curves now like a shell. You are deep inside the spiral. You reach a quiet room at the farthest edge. No one is here. A single bench faces a blank wall. A niche holds a cup of water and a dried flower. It's a place for the unremembered. You sit. No names are carved here. No symbols. Just absence. You say a name anyway, not a real one. One you invent. Seti. You imagine him young maybe, or old, kind, quiet. You imagine what he liked, maybe dates with tahini, maybe the smell of horses, maybe nothing at all. You whisper, "I remember you," and in that space, you do. You rise and leave the room, your chest strangely light. On your way back toward the temple entrance, you pass a boy with a reed brush sweeping the steps. He moves slowly, deliberately. You watch him pause at each threshold, tap the brush 3 times on the ground, and then begin again. "Why do you do that?" you ask. "To wake the souls," he says, without looking up. "Some of them nap too long." You laugh gently. But as you walk away, you wonder if he's right. You pass under the final lintel into sunlight. The temple behind you is still and silent again. but you know better now. Inside, 1,000 souls are chewing softly on the memory of bread. You leave the outer temple walls behind and step into the courtyard where the tomb workers once gathered. The dust here is finer older, as if worn smooth by centuries of quiet footsteps. This place isn't ceremonial like the sanctuaries you visited. It's more human. The benches are stone, but rounded at the edges. The pillars less grand, more practical. The mood less sacred, more neighborly. You're in the workers' necropolis now. The woman who greets you wears no headdress, no jewelry, just a plain linen tunic and a face creased by sun and time. She doesn't bow, doesn't offer ritual speech. Instead, she hands you a clay cup filled with slightly sour beer and says, "Don't spill it on the stone. The dead hate sticky feet." You nearly choke on the drink laughing. She just shrugs. "Come, they're waiting." You follow her down a slope of stairs carved directly into the desert rock. The sun disappears behind you. The air grows cool and still thick with the scent of sand limestone and a faint trace of old incense clinging to the walls. You pass shrines carved into the cliffside, simple things, some no larger than cupboards, each one bearing a name, a prayer, and sometimes a plate with a few crumbs left behind. They built tombs with their own hands, the woman says, and still couldn't afford priests. So they trained their children instead. You nod. It makes sense. Why hire a stranger to recite your name when your own granddaughter can whisper it into the morning? You reach a larger chamber, now low ceiling, 3 alcoves painted with faded images of everyday life, baking, fishing, weaving, playing music. Not gods, not crowns, just life preserved in ochre and blue and soot. This is where they feed the builders, she says. You see a few people already here. An older man arranging lentil cakes on a stone tray. A boy lighting a handful of dried palm fibers, a young woman placing her hands gently on the wall and closing her eyes. No one speaks. No one needs to. The offerings are humble onions, stale bread soaked in beer, slices of salted fish, and small pats of butter wrapped in fig leaves. But there's something sweeter about this. Less performance, more intimacy. You kneel beside one alcove where a painted figure stares back at you with the faintest smile. The name above him reads Kemweset, plasterer of tomb ceilings. You like him immediately. He seems like someone who cracked jokes when the foremen weren't looking. Someone has placed a few goose feathers beside his tray for the dust he always shook from his hair. The woman explains with a grin. You chuckle quietly and whisper his name, Chaimwaset. The stone seems to hum faintly beneath your fingertips. Farther in, you find another shrine, this one barely intact. The name is chipped. The painting almost gone. The offering slab cracked down the center. No one has visited it today. You ask why. We don't know who he was, she says. His name was erased. Maybe a punishment. Maybe weather. Maybe someone ran out of room. You feel something sink in your chest. Can I feed him anyway? You ask. She nods once, already holding out a spare piece of bread. You place it gently on the broken altar, then pause. You need to say something, even if there's no name. You say, you were here. You mattered. You built something that still stands. The silence that follows is thick with gratitude. Not spoken, not shown, but felt. The woman beside you whispers, "He'll eat well tonight." You sit for a while among the workers, joining them in the rituals that feel more like remembering than worship. Someone brings out a small drum, barely larger than your hand, and taps it rhythmically. Another hums. A lullaby, maybe. Maybe something from their childhood. One woman begins telling a story, half in words, half in gesture, about her great-grandmother's great-grandmother, who once fed her ancestor's ghost by boiling onions and simply leaving the steam in the air. No food, she says, but it still smelled like home. You imagine that a soul curling up in the scent of onions, eyes closed, smiling, remembering a life well lived and well loved. You glance around at the simple trays of food, the cracked jars, the faint carvings on the walls. This isn't a grand temple. No gold, no sacred titles, just sincerity. And yet the feeling here is stronger, more real, because this is how most souls are fed, not with opulence, but with repetition, with stories told and retold, with grandchildren who remember your favorite fruit even if they forget your birthday, with the smell of onions in steam. As the offerings are cleared away, you help brush crumbs from the floor, pour a little water onto dry altars, smooth the linen over a frayed basket. Every small act feels like an extension of the ritual, not a cleanup, a closing. Someone hands you a small charm, carved wood, shaped like a fish, worn smooth from handling. Gift, the boy says, for safe travel between worlds. You don't ask which worlds. You slip it into your pouch. As you begin the walk back up the stairs, the woman speaks again, this time without turning. They don't ask for praise, she says. Only presence. You nod. You understand now. Feeding the dead isn't just about food. It's about showing up. The sun blinds you briefly as you emerge into daylight again. The temple walls glow gold, the sky a soft expanse of blue. You pause at the threshold, letting your eyes adjust. You feel changed, full somehow, not with bread or beer, but with something heavier and lighter all at once. The memory of touch, the echo of laughter, the feeling of being held gently by 1,000 invisible hands. You breathe in, and the scent of onions drifts past, warm and familiar. You smile. Someone somewhere is feeding their dead, and tonight they'll dream well. The temple is quieter now. Afternoon has settled like dust in the corners, and even the ever-present rustle of sandals has dimmed to a distant hush. You've walked long corridors, lit flickering lamps, whispered names you'd never heard before and now won't forget. But there's still more to see. Your guide today is a man with laugh lines carved deep into his cheeks, and the kind of voice that carries stories whether he wants it to or not. He carries a reed fan not to cool himself, but to brush away flies from offerings. He taps the fan lightly against his knee and says, "Today we visit the in-betweens." You arch a brow. He smiles. Not gods, not pharaohs, not commoners, the ones in between. You follow him past the edge of the main temple complex, through a low corridor that angles downward. The light fades behind you, but not into darkness, into softness. The air cools. The hush deepens. You feel like you're entering a memory. The corridor opens into a round room, unusual for Egyptian architecture. There are no statues, no paintings. Just 27 carved niches each, with a small wooden stool in front of it. You ask what this place is. This is the shrine of the forgotten saints. You blink. Saints. Yes, he says. Not the Christian kind, not canonized, not even universally known. Just people who helped. He moves to the first niche. There's a small offering bowl filled with dried lentils and honeyed barley. This one, he says, touching the edge of the bowl, was a midwife. She saved over 100 children in her village. One day, she disappeared. Some say she was taken by the gods. Others say she simply walked into the desert and never came back. He smiles. She still gets offerings every week. Pregnant women come here to whisper their names. You're silent. He leads you to the next. This one was a baker who always gave his last loaf to the hungriest. Never missed a soul-feeding ceremony. When he died, people said the bread didn't rise the same for years. The offering here is simple. A small loaf, hard as a rock, but still fragrant with spices. Each niche tells a story like this. Not saints in the formal sense, but people who mattered, whose lives echoed past their deaths in subtle ways. People who made the world better by living gently, persistently, and then stepping aside. You sit before one niche that has no name, just a symbol carved into the wall, a single hand open. No bowl, no stool, just the mark. She had no family, your guide says. But the villagers say she left food out every night for anyone hungry, living or dead. When the offerings vanished, she'd say, someone needed it. You whisper softly, someone always does. Later, you sit in the adjacent hall, where the names of these in-betweens are written not on scrolls, but on scraps. Potsherds, bark, reused linen. One name per scrap. The handwriting varies. Some are elegant, some scrawled, some etched with care, others obviously rushed, but all are preserved. They don't get the full list, the man says, but they still get their names read aloud. He unrolls a battered scroll and begins. He reads slowly, rhythmically, like the turning of a water wheel. Nebbit, who taught children to write. Hui, who healed a broken bone with only mud and patience. Seti, who watched the graveyard so no one stole the jars. Each name lands with a soft thud like bread placed on stone. Each name draws a breath. You listen until the end. The final name is one you can't pronounce, but you feel it all the same. You ask how many names are forgotten. Thousands, he says, but we remember enough to feed the shape of them. You smile. That's beautiful. And also mysterious, because scholars still argue whether the ancient Egyptians believed the unnamed dead could truly persist in the afterlife. Some say a name was required, etched in stone, or spoken daily. Others believe memory alone could sustain a soul, that even an anonymous life well lived left behind enough warmth to be felt centuries later. Either way, the Egyptians made room for both. They planned tombs with extra niches for a friend, a stranger, or he who is loved. And even now, the temple keeps a space open for them, just in case. You move next to a small structure built outside the western wall. It's humble square, made of mud brick instead of limestone. The doorway is marked with a carved feather, the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of balance, of justice, of truth. Inside, the ritual pantry. Here is where offerings are stored, sorted, and recorded. It's not a grand space. It's practical. Clay shelves hold baskets of onions, dried herbs, sealed jars of beer, and oil. A woman sits at a low table, writing receipts not with numbers, but with symbols. You ask what she's recording. The dead, she says. You wait. She smiles. I mean the meals for the dead. Who got what, who didn't. You peek at her notes. Next to each name, a tiny glyph loaf jar, goose fig. But some have blank spaces. Those are the ones who were missed today, she says. We'll make it up to them tomorrow. You ask if that's allowed. The gods are forgiving, she says. But the dead, remember. She pulls out a second scroll. These are the ones who complained. You raise your eyebrows. Not to us, she says with a wink. To the priests, in dreams, or through bad luck. or weird shadows. She points to one line Kensu's lamp keeps going out. Another fish, spoiled 3 days in a row. Grandfather angry. You laugh, and she shrugs. We listen. We adjust. We keep feeding. She hands you a small date, sticky with honey. Go place it on the doorstep of the one who got forgotten. That's how we make it right. You walk back into the sun, holding the date like a secret. You find a small, dusty shrine with no name. You place the offering there. It shines like amber in the light. In the late afternoon, the temple begins to shift again. Preparations for evening offerings begin slower, gentler, more reflective. The loud rituals are over. The heat is fading. The world softens, and so does your pace. You find yourself back at the first offering table you saw now. Cleared, cleaned, waiting. But even now, you feel something lingering. As if the dead never truly leave. As if their hunger is not just for food, but for witness. For being seen. And in feeding them, you fed yourself too. Evening begins its quiet descent across the temple grounds. The sky fades from gold to the softest pink, the kind that lingers on the edge of memory. You find yourself standing beneath a row of palm trees, swaying gently in the desert breeze, their long shadows stretching across the stone like fingers from another world. A bell rings somewhere, but not loudly. It's the sound of transition, not announcement. The final rituals of the day are beginning the twilight offerings. This isn't just a repetition of the morning ceremony. No. These rituals are different. They aren't about nourishment. They're about companionship. You're told that in the quiet hours between sunset and sleep, the dead sometimes grow lonely. The bustle of the temple slows. The laughter fades. The footsteps vanish. But their memories stay awake. So the living come back. Just for a little while, you follow a group of temple attendants into a low open-air courtyard where oil lamps are being lit one by one, casting golden halos along the floor. There are no statues here, no false doors, just simple stone stools placed in pairs, one for the living, one for the dead. You sit on one and wait. There is no chant, no flame, no cup to raise. The ritual tonight is presence. Each person in the courtyard has brought something, a story, a piece of cloth, a song. One man cradles a worn flute. A young woman hums softly under her breath. Another simply holds an old sandal in her lap, rubbing the leather with her thumb. No one speaks to each other. They speak to the empty space beside them. You do too. You don't know who you're addressing, not exactly. But that doesn't matter. You close your eyes and begin to murmur about what you've seen, what you've learned, what you're feeling. You imagine someone across from you, maybe a woman with laugh lines and flour on her hands, maybe a boy who never had a statue, maybe a baker or a reader, or someone who liked the way wind sounded in reeds. You talk to them like you've always known them, and for a while you have. After a time, a priestess walks through the space carrying a basket of flower petals. She scatters them gently as she passes, letting them fall wherever they choose. Some land on the ground, some in laps. One lands in your open hand. It's dried, fragrant, papyrus blossom perhaps, or blue lotus. You press it to your chest. The woman smiles as she passes. They smell better when remembered. Later, you're invited to a different kind of offering, a silent procession. It begins at the edge of the workers' necropolis and winds slowly toward the temple gates. Each person carries something small, a candle, a scrap of cloth, a written name. You walk barefoot, the sand cool beneath your feet. Now your body relaxed, but alert your heart open in a way that feels like it hasn't been in years. You hold a reed scroll. It's blank. You don't know why you were given it, but you carry it carefully. As the procession moves, people begin placing their items on a low altar set beside the path, one by one, gently. Some whisper a name, others say nothing. When it's your turn, you stand before the altar unsure. Then softly you whisper, "For the one I forgot." You place the scroll down. The breeze lifts, just once. Back inside the temple, the evening wind carries the smell of olive oil and candle wax. The priests have returned to the main sanctuary, where they perform the final act of devotion, the closing of the mouth. Yes, you heard that right. After the morning's opening, the evening brings closure, not to silence the dead, but to soothe them, to tell them that it's time to rest. The ceremony is simple. A small wooden wand is passed over the lips of each statue, accompanied by a whispered line of poetry. Sleep now. You have eaten. You are whole. You sit in the shadows and watch. It's tender in a way that surprises you. You hadn't expected tenderness from a stone-faced figure cloaked in symbols. But here in this moment, the statue is a person again, not an object of worship, but a memory being tucked into bed. You think of the mornings you watched your own elders prepare coffee or stir soup, or pack rice into bamboo leaves, not out of necessity, but from care. Repetition as love. That's what this is. One last breath for the day. One last touch. One last act of love for someone who can no longer say thank you, but still deserves the gesture. You wander out to the edge of the temple just as stars begin to prick the darkening sky. A dog barks far off. An oil lamp sputters, then goes out. But you linger. A boy walks past, carrying a jar of water and a folded piece of linen. You ask what he's doing. Bedtime bath, he says. For who? For my grandfather, he answers. He doesn't like to be dusty in dreams. He smiles shyly, then disappears down a corridor you didn't notice before. You grin, then look upward. The stars are so bright, they don't twinkle. They burn. And you think maybe, just maybe, some of them are souls who've been fed so well, they shine brighter than memory. And somewhere out there, someone is watching you too. Not judging, not waiting, just smiling because you remembered. Night has fully embraced the temple now. The sun is long gone, beyond the cliffs, and the wind that once carried the smell of incense now brings only quiet. You hear it brushing over sand and stone sliding through the palm fronds like silk. The moon rises not bold or theatrical, but soft white kind. You breathe in deeply. The air has changed. It's gentler now. The day's offerings are done. The lamps have been extinguished, one by one. The priests have returned to their cells or homes. The workers have gone quiet, their tools laid down. But the temple does not sleep, not really, because now it belongs to the dreamers. You follow a narrow stairway down toward a small vaulted chamber tucked beneath the northern corner of the temple. You had passed it before without noticing, just another doorway in a sea of stone. But now, lit by moonlight and a single oil lamp, it beckons. The walls here are painted not with gods or kings, but with dreams, literally, birds emerging from mouths, eyes opening in flowers, men walking backward beneath a night sky. Images that seem nonsensical until you realize you've seen them before in your own mind, somewhere between sleep and waking. You've entered the chamber of dream offerings. A priestess is waiting there, dressed not in white linen, but in deep indigo, her robe speckled with tiny embroidered stars. Her head is wrapped in a soft scarf the color of midnight, and she carries no tools, only a folded piece of parchment and a bowl of cooled ashes. She smiles gently. "This is where the dead give back," she says. You tilt your head confused. She explains, "During the day, we feed them bread beer, stories, incense. At night, they feed us. In dreams." She invites you to sit beside the central basin, filled not with water, but with powdered charcoal and crushed myrrh. The scent is earthy grounding. She begins to stir it slowly, with her finger creating a spiral. We ask for a dream in return, a message, a memory, something they want us to remember, or something we forgot. She begins to chant softly, not in formal Egyptian, but in a dialect so old it sounds like breathing. Her voice is low, rhythmic, calming. You feel your shoulders soften, your eyelids flutter. She says, "Place your wish for a dream inside the smoke." She hands you a thin strip of papyrus and a reed pen. You pause, think, then you write slowly, "Show me who I've forgotten." You fold the strip 3 times and hand it back. She places it into a tiny clay pot beside the basin and lights a coal inside. Smoke rises thin, silver sweet. You close your eyes and wait. You don't know how much time passes. Maybe minutes, maybe an hour. But in the darkness behind your eyes, something begins to form. A room, simple, stone. You're seated on the floor. Across from you, someone sits too cloaked in shadow. They don't speak, but they hand you a bowl of warm stew. Lentils, garlic, something sweet. You eat. It tastes like memory, like home, like every story you've ever been told. And then the figure leans forward and says just one thing. Don't stop. You wake, still seated. The priestess is gone. The lamp is still lit. And beside you is a tray of bread you didn't see before, warm to the touch. You smile. Maybe you were fed too. Later, in the outer courtyard, a group gathers beneath the stars for the midnight meal. It's not grand. A pot of beans, a basket of figs, 3 jugs of beer already half empty. But they eat in silence, passing the food from hand to hand, from soul to soul. You join them, and someone places a cup in your hands. No words, just presence. You eat a fig. You feel its seeds on your tongue. And in that tiny crunch, you remember something small and precious, the sound of your mother peeling oranges, the smell of clay in summer, the way your grandfather once hummed to himself while sharpening a knife. You whisper that memory aloud. Someone nods. They whisper one back. A chain of remembering begins. Not just names, not just titles, but moments. A daughter's braid, a neighbor's laugh, the sound of reed sandals on stone. Each one spoken becomes a meal for the soul that once carried it. This is how the dead feast now, not just on bread, but on remembrance. You wander alone through the outer temple walls, the stars bright and proud above you now. There's one final ritual for the night. You return to the central chamber, the first you entered this morning. Now empty, now still. You stand before the offering table. It's been cleared, but you place your hand on its surface and say simply, "Thank you." And for the first time all day, you don't speak for the dead. You speak to them. And for a moment, you hear a sound like wind through feathers, like laughter in a dream, like warm water poured into stone. You smile and walk into the night. You return to the temple at dawn, not because you planned to, not because you were told to, but because something pulled you back. The sun is only beginning to stir its first blush, barely touching the horizon. The sky is deep violet, the color of amethyst. The sands are still cold, The temple looms before you, not as an ancient ruin, but as a house that has just woken up. A house that never really slept. This time, you don't go through the grand entrance. You take the side path, the one used by attendants and bread carriers, shadow readers, and children learning to speak to statues. You pass the quiet kitchen, where barley dough already rises beneath linen cloth. You hear someone whistling softly behind the walls. Someone is making breakfast, and this time, it's not for you. Today's ritual is different, not public, not formal. Today, you're brought to a family tomb, a small, beautifully painted chamber just outside the main complex where the lineage of a priestly household is buried together. This is our morning, says your guide, a woman with gray braids and a voice like silk over stone. We've fed the kings. Now, we feed our own. You follow her down a short stairway into a narrow room painted with soft ochres and lapis lines. Scenes of daily life, a father playing with a child, a woman pounding grain, a boy chasing a goose. The usual scenes of eternity. The offering table is modest. 2 loaves, 1 jug of beer, a bowl of dates, a clay lamp still flickering from the night. No priest recites here. No scroll is read. Instead, the woman opens her hands and begins to talk. Not chant, not invoke, just talk. She tells them what she's been doing. How the barley crop is late this year. How her youngest is learning to write. How the neighbor's cat keeps stealing the offering bread. She laughs. You laugh too. The dead apparently love gossip. You're invited to add something. You pause, then reach into your pouch and pull out the little carved fish you were given days ago. You place it gently beside the bowl of dates. For safe travel, you whisper. They nod. They understand. Later, you walk with the family to the storeroom where extra food is kept for monthly and festival offerings. You help carry baskets, your arms filled with onions, your breath full of the scent of ground coriander and garlic. The storeroom is dark and cool, its ceiling low, its shelves stacked with jars sealed in wax and tied with reeds. You feel like you've entered someone's pantry, and you have. Only here, the someone just happens to be dead. A girl offers you a jar and says, "This was for my uncle. But he visited me in a dream and said he wants beer instead." I think he's lying. You smirk. But hand her the jug of beer anyway. You've learned by now, honor the dream. You move next into a courtyard where small portable shrines are being loaded onto carts. You ask where they're going. Home, someone says. Every so often, families take the statues of their deceased out of the temple back to their households for a night, a festival, a quiet dinner. They like to come back, the woman with the braids says, to see the house, to hear the river again, to feel the dust on the porch. She says it without ceremony, just truth. You help lift one shrine, smaller than a crate, painted with blue eyes and a gold rim, and place it onto a donkey cart. A boy climbs up and pats the shrine twice. "You're riding front today," he tells the spirit inside. No arguments. The donkey brays. Someone laughs, and off they go. You walk back toward the inner temple. You pass a wall where names have been etched, not in hieroglyphs, but in coal and ash, temporary smudged fading. Someone asks if you want to write yours. You hesitate, then pick up a piece of coal and slowly write your name. It will be gone tomorrow, but for now it's here, written among the living and the dead. That evening, as dusk returns and the first stars prick the sky, you sit beneath the same palm tree as before. You're no longer a visitor. Not entirely. You've poured beer for a ghost. You've whispered to a name you never met. You fed someone with memory alone, and in return, you've been fed too. by stories, by ritual, by the strange comfort of feeding the ones who can no longer ask for anything but still deserve everything. You lie back and close your eyes, not to sleep, not yet, but to listen, and you hear it. The soft sound of chewing. Somewhere someone is eating their breakfast. Because of you, night deepens once more, and with it comes a change, not in the rituals, but in you. You feel it now, humming in your limbs, flickering behind your eyes. It's not fatigue, it's familiarity. You've become part of the temple's rhythm, its breath, its routine. The line between past and present blurs. You are no longer a guest observing from the threshold. You are inside it, folded into the ritual like flour into dough. Tonight, you're taken to a rarely spoken of part of the complex, the threshold rooms. These aren't for the living, your guide says softly, but they're not quite for the dead either. He brings you through a low stone arch, draped with dyed linen strips that rustle like leaves when brushed. The air here is dry thick with the scent of burnt frankincense and something older, salt clay. You can't name it, but it settles behind your tongue like ash. The room is small, circular, every inch of wall carved with glyphs and tiny figures, people in the act of crossing rivers, stepping through doors, climbing ramps into the sky. There are no seats, no statues, just a floor of polished stone gleaming faintly in the lamplight. This is where we wait for the ones who haven't left yet, your guide explains. Not ghosts, not spirits, in-betweens, souls who linger not out of malice, but of habit, or hope, or unfinished affection. You sit in silence and wait. There is no chant, no incense, no offering, just stillness, and then a sound, not loud, not even external, just a flicker in your chest, like a memory stirring, a face you haven't thought of in years, someone brushing your shoulder as they passed. You breathe in and realize they've been waiting for you too. Later, you're given a brush and a pot of thin black ink. You're asked to paint a passage, not a picture, a passage, a way through. Everyone's is different. Some draw rivers, some staircases. One woman draws a field of stars with a single path winding through them. You don't know what to draw at first. Then, without thinking, your hand moves. You paint a table, just a table, set with two bowls, one full, one waiting. You finish and set the brush down. No one comments, but your guide nods. Good, he says. You've left the door open. The next room holds a listening stone, a single black rock polished smooth set in the center of the floor. You kneel, they say. You press your ear to it, and you listen. You do. At first there's nothing, then layers, not words, but murmurs, like the wind inside a house, like soup stirred in a deep pot, like someone turning pages in another room. You close your eyes and breathe with it, and for just a moment you feel as though someone is breathing with you. You open your eyes. Your heart feels steadier. You're brought then to the final chamber of the night, the room of last offerings. It is nearly empty. Just a small altar with a cup of milk, a sliver of date, a bowl of salt, and a single word carved above it. If your guide doesn't explain, they don't need to. You understand. If someone remembers, if the name is whispered, if the story is told, if the bread is placed, then the dead live. And even if all else fades, if the tombs collapse, if the names are lost, if the temples turn to sand, this offering still matters. You kneel and place your hand beside the bowl. You say a name, not because anyone told you to, but because you want to. And in doing so, you keep the fire lit. You leave the threshold rooms, just as the horizon begins to pale. The stars recede like shy servants. The sky warms at its edges. The temple groans quietly, stretching, stirring, waking. You return to the courtyard where someone is sweeping the stones clean. Another lights the first lamp of the day. A tray of bread is set near the false door, and the cycle begins again. Feed, remember, rest, repeat. You understand now. The offering never ends, because neither does love. It's morning again, though it hardly feels like time has passed. The sun rises, as it always does, slowly, with soft confidence casting its honey-colored light across the worn stone and flaking murals of the outer courtyard. You stretch your limbs and realize how much of yourself you've left inside this temple. Not in fatigue, in presence. You've learned the names. You've felt the smoke curl around your shoulders. You've watched statues eat with eyes that never blink. And now, on this final morning, you're invited to witness the most ancient of rituals, one so old, even the priests call it by a whisper. The first meal. You follow a procession, not through the main hall, but around the temple's rear into a series of rock-cut tombs reserved for the earliest ancestors, not kings, not builders, not scribes, but those who came before the idea of names even mattered. You descend slowly into the earth, each step a surrender to stillness. The air cools, thickens. You pass walls painted with spirals, hand stars, not stories, but impressions, as if someone tried to record a dream with fingers instead of words. Your guide speaks now only with gestures. The silence is part of the rite. You reach the final chamber, a round room, low ceiling lit by a single shaft of light cut through the stone above. It falls directly on the central stone table. Not an altar, not a slab, a table. On it, one loaf, one cup of beer, one salted fish, one sprig of mint. You're told these are not symbolic. They are exact. The first meal ever offered to the dead. The original menu. You are asked to sit with it, not to recite, not to adjust, just to be with it. So you sit. You inhale the smell of old stone and fresh bread. You watch the sunlight warm the crust of the loaf, and you feel that this meal is not a recreation. It is a return to something we have always done since memory began. Your thoughts drift, and you begin to see faces. Not clearly, but enough. You see a young woman laying flowers beside a river, a child dropping a fig into a clay bowl, a man whispering a name into his soup. They aren't priests. They aren't scholars. They're just people who remembered someone, people who fed someone who could no longer feed themselves. And as you sit there, you realize you're one of them now. Eventually, you're led back to the surface. The temple stands unchanged, and yet everything feels different. Not because it's changed, but because you have. You've seen offerings that weren't offerings, songs that weren't songs, food that was never meant to be eaten, but always meant to be shared. You've learned how the Egyptians fed their dead, but more than that, you've learned how to care, how to say, I remember you, without needing proof, how to speak a name with your breath, even when it's lost in stone, how to set a bowl down and believe someone receives it, even if it's only in a dream. And so you find yourself in the temple's final corridor. The wind moves gently, now brushing the linen curtains like a sigh. The incense has burned down. The lamps are low. You're told this is where you end, where you say goodbye, but you know better. You don't say goodbye in a temple like this. You just pause, because someone else will come after you. They'll bring their own names, their own loaves, their own stories, and the dead will wait, not impatiently, just faithfully, as they always have. You place your last offering down, a single crumb from the bread you never ate, and a word that isn't a name, just a whisper, a promise. I'll remember. And as you step into the light, you hear the faintest voice, or maybe it's the wind, whispering back, "So will we." And now, as the temple fades behind your footsteps, the sun softens into its final glow of the day. The wind is quiet. The doves have gone still. The last incense has turned to ash. You've walked the long, slow circle of remembering, and you've come back not with answers, but with something gentler, something fuller. You feel it in your chest, in your fingertips, in the soles of your feet, still powdered with temple dust, the rhythm of care. The way a name can be bred, the way silence can be a song, the way a soul, even one forgotten, can still rise like the sun when spoken of with love. So now, as you lie back into your own bed or wherever you're resting, let this feeling linger. Imagine the quiet hands placing a loaf, the hush before the chant, the smile on a statue that never moves but always listens. Let the memory of this long journey settle around you like soft linen. You fed the dead, and in return, they've given you peace. You've wandered through doorways that don't exist in walls, but in memory. And now, with every breath, you carry that stillness forward. There is no need to hold on tightly. The names will stay. The stories will wait. The offering has been made. Your work tonight is done. So rest, sleep, and when dreams come, may they be full of temples, bread, and quiet joy. May the dead you've fed walk beside you, not in fear, but in comfort. And if you wake tomorrow and whisper someone's name, you'll know you're still part of the ritual, still remembering, still feeding, still loved.